Lord MacGregor, your committee have been looking into the economic impact and effectiveness of development aid. What prompted the committee to look at the subject and why?
The committee is composed of a lot of experts in economic matters from across all parties and from none. And we felt that this was a huge programme of government spending. It's nearly £8 billion this year, and rising very fast, rising faster than any other government programmes. So we wanted to look at development aid and see whether it was being properly and effectively spent. In other words, was the taxpayer and the recipients, were they both getting value for money? We were not looking at humanitarian aid, that's aid for disasters and real poverty situations. We were looking at aid that encourages development in underdeveloped countries to lift people out of poverty.
So who did the committee hear from for its inquiry?
We had a huge amount of written evidence, and we actually had hearings with 30 different witnesses from all over, from the private sector, from government, from departments, from aid organisations, and we took all this evidence. And the interesting point was, at the end of the day, despite the fact that the committee is composed of people from different parties, we were unanimous in our decisions.
So central to the recommendations in the report is the view that the government should abandon its target of spending 0.7% of the UK's gross national income on aid. What led you to this conclusion?
Well, there are 2 points really. The first point is that it's just about the only government department and government spending that's actually increasing substantially in real terms. It's aiming to increase by about 37% over the next few years, and no other government spending is anywhere near that. And the second point is that we wanted to make sure that the money was effectively spent. Now, if you set a target, it means that your aim is to actually reach that target in spending, irrespective of whether the money is being spent to good effect. And we thought that was the wrong way round. You ought to be looking at getting real value for money, both for the countries receiving it and for the taxpayer here, and not just set an artificial target. It doesn't happen anywhere else in government.
What other major findings do the committee have?
Well, apart from that point, which is pretty crucial, because although it's an international target, very few other countries are getting anywhere near it, and we didn't think that it was sensible use of taxpayers' money just to set a spending target without looking at how effectively the money was spent. So apart from that, we had a number of other recommendations which broadly supported the direction that the Secretary of State is now going in. We've welcomed a lot of his new directions and just urge him to go further. First of all, we want to insist that value for money is always achieved in lifting poorer countries out of poverty and getting economic growth so that they can overcome the poverty problem. And you need to get value for money. Secondly, we want to make sure that the money is spent without corruption. There's evidence of quite a lot of fraud and corruption in some countries, and we want to see a further drive on that. Thirdly, we believe that the private sector, companies and businesses, actually almost contribute more to aid and help developing countries develop their economies than government aid. So we want more encouragement of the private sector. We also feel that about over a third of aid goes through the World Bank, international agencies, and the European Union. And we don't think that money is anything like as effectively spent as if it is spending directly. So we want a real scrutiny of that. And finally, we believe that it's important that we increase the staffing in the countries where aid is being received to ensure that the money is properly spent and isn't being siphoned off in wrong directions. And where aid has achieved its objectives in lifting developing countries and providing economic growth, we think aid should be phased out in those countries so that it can be directed to those with the greatest need.
So what happens next? What do you hope your report will achieve?
We hope, and this has happened with all our reports until now, we hope that the government will take our recommendations seriously. In many ways, as I say, we're just urging the Secretary of State to do more than he's doing already in the directions he's heading. So he should feel that we are backing him very strongly there. And we will continue to urge the government to look very closely at the realism behind trying to achieve that 0.7% target.